The following is a Spirit Street production.
Man, college athletics today, as we talk about most days on here, is just absolutely insane. Well, now there is a lawsuit that is going on that, I don't know. Is it going to be the end of college athletics as we know it? I think it just very well may be. We're talking about that. We've got a couple of guests on the show today to speak about exactly what's going to happen, where we're at, and what's in the future. So today, this is the Big 12 Insiders, people.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. This is your man, Brien Hanley. Today, we have got Tim Fitzgerald. We've also got Curry Sexton. Curry, it was a former K-State player, also an attorney. He's going to kind of describe a little bit as far as what's going on with this crazy House versus the NCAA, lawsuit. Kind of break down, is the end of amateurism here? What's going on? So first things first, what's going on, fellas? How you guys doing today?
Curry?
I'm doing good, Brien. Happy to be here with you guys. Happy to chat about the ever-changing landscape of collegiate athletics and maybe what may be the most significant change yet. So thanks for having me on, guys. Looking forward to our discussion.
No problem.
Yeah, Brien, I'm so glad Curry could do this on short notice because we would have been bumbling idiots. Yeah. Now we're going to look smart, all because of him. It works out great for us.
It's always about who you know, Fitz.
I know.
It's always about who you know.
I know. And I realize it's two K-Staters inviting a K-Stater on a Big 12 show, but Curry is uniquely qualified for this. Not only does he run Wildcat NIL with some other former players, but as I mentioned, he's an attorney and also kind of like sports. He's a former K-State football player. So he's got every angle of this covered, and I'm going to be interested to see where this goes.
Absolutely. So I guess the first thing that we're going to start off with, guys, let's just talk about exactly what's going on. There were some rumblings that happened near the end of last week, and I got a lot of questions about it. The House versus the NCAA. First thing is, the questions were, what is it? Is like, are they actually suing the NCAA? And so I guess my question to you, Curry, kind of break down. I've got a little bit of a handle on this, but just kind of break it down for everybody, the logistics of what this lawsuit actually is.
Of course, it is the lawsuit that if not disposed of properly could be the death knell for the NCAA.
Right.
And I think that's why this is, why there's been so much coverage on this lawsuit recently. When the NCAA permitted college athletes to earn NIL compensation starting July 1, 2021, it was only a matter of time before then former or soon to be former student athletes filed suit against the NCAA and said, okay, you're permitting this now, and have come out multiple times since then and said that the previous position was wrong. Well, we're going to sue for what we missed out on. We're going to sue for the opportunities that we weren't entitled to because the NCAA forbid us from earning compensation based off of our NIL. So the lawsuit, the House case is the name of, I believe, a former swimmer at Arizona State University. So he and other named plaintiffs, along with thousands of other former NCAA collegiate student athletes, sued the NCAA saying that you violated federal antitrust law by prohibiting us from earning compensation based off our names, images, and likenesses. And so this case has been, I would say, kind of sitting there in the background over the course of the last couple of years, developing as class actions do. Plaintiffs trying to get through certification stages, which are important stages in in federal class actions. And now that we are to this point of, okay, we're almost 3 years in NIL, and it's become quite clear that the current model is not sustainable. How do we create a model that is more sustainable? And then in comes the House case and a potential settlement of it.
Gotcha. Curry, this is the case. I mean, they're working on a settlement right now with some shocking numbers. That's the settlement numbers. that will set in motion pretty much the demise of the NCAA as we know it. All student athletes will get paid. This isn't just about college football. But that back pay that the settlement's working on at minimum is going to be $1 billion spread out over the Power 4 now institutions, which is roughly 65 schools. Although I don't know how Houston and UCF is viewed in this because they weren't in the Power 5 then. It's an amazing number. I figured it up. It's just the settlement portion of this, not the annual, what it's going to cost, in paying athletes, is $15 to $20 million a school. That's a shocking number, man.
Yeah, and it's in that number, and I guess the number that could be, or I guess if you're looking at it from the lens of a settlement, that it could have been significantly higher if they would have, or if they do
Right.
go to trial and the plaintiffs get a judgment in their favor because of something that's called treble damages. So if the actual damage number is $1 billion, which is what it's claimed to be, then the treble damage, if a jury awards the plaintiffs treble damages, that number could triple. So it could grow to $4 billion or more, which would, I think, bankrupt the NCAA and many of its member institutions. And so
Right.
the motivation from the NCAA side and from the side of the individual member schools to get this resolved in a way that allows us to avoid the worst case scenario of bankruptcy or other things that are other drastic measures, and B, finding using this lawsuit as a vehicle to finding a path forward that is hopefully more sustainable than the path that we're currently on.
Right. Here's a question that a lot of people have asked me over the last couple of days, Curry, is these schools are going to get this money, with this settlement. Who's the money actually going to go to? Because how far back, are they going to give it to former student athletes? And how far back are they going to go? Because it's like, well, where do you stop? Look, I'm not trying to be somebody that's greedy or anything. I played on a number one team in the country. And, who's to say how much I or any of the other people that were on our team, how much we were worth? That was back in 1998. Are they going back that far to pay people? Are they going back further than that? Like, where is this going to end?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And unfortunately for guys like yourself and me, we're going to miss the boat on this one. I think obviously statute of limitations come into play.
Right.
My last year was 2014 and I'm going to miss it by, I think, 2 or 3 years. So the window is I believe it's 2016 or 2017 to 2020. So it's those people who played for the 3 or 4 year period preceding in NIL becoming legal. And so really what's going to happen is you're going to have if the settlement goes through as it's being reported, you're going to have 2 buckets. There's going to be the $1 billion, the $1 billion settlement amount, which is going to be paid out to former athletes from that 2016, 2017 to 2020 timeframe over the course of years. So if it's 15 to 20 million per school, that may be paid out over 5-10 years to lessen the blow on the front end. So you're going to have that bucket, the $1 billion in back pay, essentially. And then you're going to have on the other side, is maybe the more compelling side, is the revenue sharing side. And so what's being reported on right now, and again, I don't know that this is concrete, is that the Power 4 schools are going to be required to revenue share with their student athletes at a certain percentage of the average yearly revenue for the Power 4 schools. So they're adding up all the yearly revenue of the Power 4 schools, dividing it by whatever that number is. I believe it's close to 65, and then let's say it's 20%. That's the amount that they're all going to be required to revenue share with their student athletes. Then from there, I think the really, really intriguing question for many folks is, one, I guess there's more than one intriguing question. The first one is, how do schools afford that? How does a school like K-State afford that? 20% of the average revenue, I guess that number, if it's 20% of the average, that's going to be way higher for us than it is for an Ohio State. How do we afford that? 2, who receives that money? Obviously, as we know, football at K-State and most other places is the biggest revenue driver on campus. Basketball is the only other true revenue producer. And so are we gonna, are those two sports, are those athletes going to be receiving the bulk of this? Is it going to have to be spread out equally pursuant to Title IX? There are a lot of questions that a lot of people are asking, and I don't know that anybody truly has the answer to them at this point.
Yeah, I think this is the most troubling part of this settlement to schools such as Kansas State. They've been able to compete at pretty high levels with a smaller budget, certainly in the bottom half of the Power Five, if not the bottom 25% of the Power Five. So mathematically, the penalty is much more severe for Kansas State than in Ohio State, or even for an Oklahoma or Texas. That, $15 to $20 million out of their budget is 10% or less. For Kansas State, it's 20% of your budget has to go then to paying student athletes, and you pretty much have to pay at that level. There's a discussion of not everyone being required to, but if you want to compete, you're going to have to. It's a complex issue, and I just don't know how schools like Kansas State will handle this. But would this replace NILs?
That's the other big question, and I guess that in an ideal world, this House case is the mechanism that creates a uniform approach to NIL. But the hard part with NIL is, people always say, well, how about a salary cap? Well, I think that's great in the context of college student athletes being employees. I think it works in that way. But if we're talking about true NIL, NIL is marketing. It's right. In its purest sense, it's marketing, and in no way has anybody ever been able to limit an athlete's ability to earn marketing dollars, an athlete or influencer of any kind. And so that's the tricky part is you say, okay, well, that's great. That's great that the schools are going to rev share with these athletes because, the athletes are helping produce a ton of income. But how do we stop these private donors from just doling out millions and millions of dollars? So in essence, the concern is that we are going to say, okay, well, if right now, most Power 5 schools are operating with an NIL pool of, let's say, 6 million to 20 million. Mm-hmm. If schools are required to pay the $20 million out, are we just raising the floor? Or is then the range going to be 20 million to 40 million? Right. So that's a big concern of mine is how does this truly help in the end? Right. If what it does is say, this is it, this is the cap, that's great. But I just don't know how we can legally do that unless we use employee status, collective bargaining as the avenue to make that happen. And I just don't think that's the case right now.
Right. One thing that, that's come up, obviously there's people that are going to be against this. A lot of people, especially maybe administrators that are trying to avoid making student athletes employees. That's kind of what, and I don't think it's just administrators. I think that's kind of universal across the board. People are trying to prevent that. Now, are they going to be able to? I don't know. That's not for me to answer. Right. I really don't have the answer to that. But I guess the thing is, because there's still some remaining court cases that are out there that are still trying to make student athletes employees. Will this settlement affect it in those lawsuits in any way?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer, to be honest with you. I know that I guess I have a couple of responses to that. One, Jeffrey Kessler, who's the lead attorney on the House case for the plaintiffs, has other lawsuits against the NCAA, which I believe would be wrapped into this settlement. So those would go away, which would be a positive for the NCAA, conference school perspective. As far as those actions being brought against Notre Dame, UCLA, USC, the Pac-12, right. Dartmouth, I don't know that they would be able to get those to go away. My expectation is that they're, and I think this is what makes this settlement a little bit, the possibility of the settlement a little bit tenuous is they're going to have some level of reliance on Congress to pass an antitrust exemption, even if it's in a short 6, 8, 10-year window. And I wonder if they're also going to be going to Congress and asking them to say student athletes cannot be classified as employees, because that's something we've seen come up in legislation in different states, different areas from time to time. Because yes, that would present a whole different issue if, okay, we've got the rev share now. Oh, and also athletes are going to become employees, are going to be able to collectively bargain with their institutions or with their conferences. I don't know that that revenue sharing and collective bargaining can run side by side. I don't know if that's possible.
No.
Well, my thoughts on the employee thing is the ADs, from what I understand, are reluctant to make them employees because all the hidden costs that people don't think about. You become an employee, you got, taxes that they have to take care of, employee taxes, and then retirement and, a full health plan, which most athletes have through the department. But I mean, unless a state would come up with a new classification of student athlete employees, all that's got to be on the table. When that drives up the expense even more. But let me ask you this. If they go to the employee model, what are the ramifications for Title IX?
It's a great question. I think you can ask that question whether you're looking at the employee model or the rev share model. Okay. What are the implications of Title IX? And that's a great question. I think that's going to be something. It's already being litigated in the state of Oregon right now, and I think we may see something come out of that case that helps paint a better picture for us. But right now, that's a huge question. How is Title IX implicated in this? So rev share, I mean, that I brought up earlier, are the basketball, football players going to receive the bulk of this because they're the ones generating the revenue that's being ultimately shared, or are we going to have to spread this across the board? Another, something that's going to have to be discussed, if, whether whether we go the employee route or the rev share route, is, are sports going to get dropped? If schools like K-State have to come up with $15 to $20 million in rev share a year, they're going to have to find a way to cut expenses in addition to driving revenue. And we, part of that is going to be some of your fringe sports are going to have to go away. And obviously you're going to bring Title IX straight into the discussion, but that's a discussion that's going to have to be had. Can we continue to support our rowing program if we're revenue sharing at a $15 to $20 million clip? Another thing, jobs. And I'm not talking jobs for the student athletes, but jobs for people who work within the department. We already saw Texas A&M last week cut 12 jobs, 12 jobs, I think, that were fairly high paying, getting ready for this revenue sharing phase that we're about to enter into, or reportedly going to enter into. And that's something you're going to see as well. You're going to see athletic departments get more lean as they try to cut costs. And so there's just a lot of ramifications that I don't think anybody's certain about. You talk about Title IX again. I'm kind of talking in circles here, but you talk about Title IX in the sense of rev share. If we have to, if Title IX if we're required to comply with Title IX, when rev share is a thing, if we've got $15 million to spread amongst our 450 student athletes at K-State, I can guarantee you that for a starting quarterback the caliber of Avery Johnson, that's not going to be sufficient. If he's one of 450 sharing in that $15 million pie, that's not going to be enough we're not going to be paying him the market rate for a high caliber starting Division I quarterback. So that's another thing is how do we move forward while understanding the implications of Title IX? And I don't know that that's something that we've quite come up with an answer for yet.
I just find this aspect fascinating because Title IX has helped women's sports so much. But the confusion often is it's about opportunity, not necessarily budgetary equality.
Correct.
And it's also my understanding that being employees would take them out of the Title IX field because they're no longer students, they're employees. I mean, they're students, but they're getting paid, and Title IX doesn't apply. If the NCAA lowers the minimum sports requirements, Curry, I can see some departments going down to football, the 2 basketballs, about 6 to 8 sports to get by. Now, certainly the Texases and Ohio States won't have to do it, but this could be the irony is a swimmer brought this up, and swimming could be one of the most devastated sports if Title IX doesn't apply.
Absolutely. And that's something that, you talk about collateral damage, and that's exactly what we're going to see. I think you're right on I didn't address the employee Title IX thing. I think you're exactly right. But yes, I mean, I think something's going to have to give in terms of if schools have to share this large amount of revenue on a year-to-year basis, the NCAA or whoever governs ultimately these Power Four schools is going to have to give up some ground somewhere. And I think you're going to see that in the way of cutting of allowing them to reduce the number of required sports.
Right. You both of you guys are right on. It's just like any business. Look, we've got a budget. This is what it is. And if we've got to, unfortunately, let go of somebody to still be profitable, then this is what we have to do. It's, I know people don't like looking at it this way, but me and Fitz have had this conversation a lot, Curry. College athletics has always been a business. I don't remember when it ever was not a business. It's always been one. We just didn't look at it that way. And only certain aspects got paid during this business. And now it's different. And and I think people are caught off guard and they're so upset about it, thinking, oh, well, it's always been a business. It's always been about money. It's never changed. It's just now the athletes are getting paid. And I think they haven't had enough time to adjust to what's going on, in my opinion. Maybe I'm off base here, but I just don't think people have had enough time to adjust, because they think that, okay, you get a scholarship and that's all you should get. Well, no, not really, and I know I'm on the player side of it because I was one, but I just know for me personally, and that's all I can ever speak to is just me personally. When I couldn't buy a pizza at Pizza Shuttle because I didn't have any money, although I was out there playing, and you didn't allow me to work, that was a problem. Now I guess they allow you to do some of that now, but it's still a problem. And if you didn't allow me to work, I shouldn't have to go get a student loan and go get into debt because you don't allow me to work. That's always been my whole thing. I know it's a little different now, and I get that, but that's been my whole hang up about it, is that it's always been a business, guys. It's never has it not been.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah, and and for so many years, everybody benefited from that business except the student athletes who were at the core of that business. You look at a place like Manhattan, Kansas, and look what the '90s era K-State football teams did for this community. I mean, I think Fitz can attest to that better than anybody because he's been here since throughout. That's looking past the NCAA and all the NCAA officials who make a ton of money, the conference officials, the coaches, the athletic directors, everybody else who's in that circle. Well, then you go out from there and it's the communities that are really benefiting from it. There's layers to that. And yet you've got these collegiate student athletes. I mean, look at Michael Bishop. Michael Bishop in a short time at K-State made K-State and the Big 12 and the NCAA tons and tons and tons of money. Michael, for whatever reason, didn't have a lengthy NFL career, so his window was much shorter.
Right.
Too bad Michael Bishop couldn't receive couldn't make some money off of his massive profile in college, because he sure moved the needle for a lot of people. So I'm with you, Brien. I think it was far past due when it happened, but I think the issue is we went from 0 to 1,000 overnight. And it's taking people time to adjust. And now that we're in it, we're changing every day. And it's just, we're trying to catch up to all that lost time. I mean, I think we were 20 years past due. So we're trying to catch up at warp speed, which has been really challenging at times.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break here and hear from a word from our sponsors, Synergy Financial Partners. We'll be right back. I'll ask a couple of questions to both of you. One of them, is this going to be the end of the NCAA? So we will be right back after we hear from Synergy Financial Partners.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
All right, welcome back, everybody, back to Big 12 Insider. So, look, with this settlement coming down and what's happening with this I guess, this lawsuit, let's just call it that, with this big settlement that's going to come down, the big question that I have, and I think a lot of people have, and this is for both of you and what your opinions are, is I don't know that this is, number one, going to be the end of it. Let's just say it settles. That doesn't mean that this is the end of people suing the NCAA. I think that's number one, that people got to realize that that doesn't put an end to it. There's still got to be other layers and things that happen. And if all this goes down, and I kind of teased before that we took our break, is this going to be the end of the NCAA as we know it, or is it just going to go away?
Yeah, I guess I'll take the first stab. End of the NCAA altogether? I don't think so. But end of the NCAA as we know it, absolutely. I think we've been trending that direction even without the recent news regarding the House case.
Right.
I think we're going to be to a point where college football largely runs on its own now. I mean, its signature event is run by an organization that is separate and apart from the NCAA and the college football playoff. I think college basketball and its tournament are probably going to follow suit at some point. I think we're going to get to a place where, in my view, the NCAA has nothing to do with football and basketball, the two primary sports. And then maybe the NCAA's role is to oversee all of those equivalency sports or non-revenue generating sports on the side. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know how they would be able to do that without football and basketball keeping them afloat. But that's my expectation, is that the NCAA sooner rather than later will not have any roles or responsibilities with respect to college football and college basketball.
Curry, this seems like the biggest story on all this stuff we're talking about. We're talking about the transfer portal, the NIL, how those things have impacted college sports, and honestly been a much greater impact than we predicted. And the NIL is moving so fast, I believe it's not sustainable. I mean, you get a budget up to $4 million. The next year, everyone else has moved to $6 million. You got to get as close to that. It's just going to happen every year. I don't think schools such as K-State are going to be able to sustain it, but I think schools all over the country are going to struggle with donor fatigue, and just people that at some point say, okay, I've done all I can here. I'm not, this doesn't give me much return, because I see a problem here that the NIL isn't being used as name, image, and likeness. It's being as a way to pay recruits and pay players. And a lot of schools aren't even requiring a social media post for this money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think it's sustainable at all. And that's something that we are all hopeful that this current model is not long lived.
Yeah.
I'd like to say, just because of our more recent embrace of NIL at K-State, that we're kind of in the early stages here as far as getting our donor base engaged. Mm-hmm. So I tell people I feel like we're truly in year one, because starting with our official partnership with K-State Athletics at the end of January, we really just collectively embraced it for the first time. And so I think we're further away from the donor fatigue than some of these other schools that have been attacking it since July 1, 2021. But absolutely, I mean, you think about over the course of the last 35 years since Bill Snyder got to K-State, we've asked donors to help us with project after project after project. With a lot of those projects, or most of those projects, you can look up and see, okay, wow, Veneer Family Football Complex looks incredible. Shamrock End Zone looks incredible. I mean, you can see the tangible results of people's money. Mm-hmm. NIL is a lot different. Sure, if you go win a national championship and you paid a lot of NIL money, you're going to feel like you got a great return on your investment. Or even if you win a Big 12 championship, you're going to think, man, that was worth it. But if we have another basketball season like we had this year, if you're somebody putting up a lot of money for the men's basketball team, that's not going to be something that you want to do year over year. You're going to say, what am I paying for? Where are my funds going? And so I think that's a tricky part of it too. And then I think even with success, whatever success may be in the next couple of years, I think donors don't have the ability to essentially just give away money. And so I do think that something has to change, and we're going to see that change sooner rather than later, because the current model I don't think it's good for anybody.
I agree.
No, that's my thing. It's just not good for college athletics in general. And I think that's where fans get so sideways with this, is because they say that it's ruining college football. It's ruining college basketball. And I used to push back on that, Curry, all the time and say, oh, hold on a second. It's not ruining it. Now that we have gotten deeper in the weeds here, yeah, it kind of is. Now, granted, we don't – when they kick the ball off in late August, early September, nobody cares at that point. But it's times like right now, the beginning of May, where, yeah, man – fans are kind of on base with this thing, because it's like we've talked about, it's not going to be sustainable. Anybody that knows anything about any business, and I don't mean you have to know about business, if you just can balance your budget for your own family, that this isn't sustainable. It's just money going out, not enough coming in. You're divvying up this. I mean, it's just is what it is. I'm just trying to figure out, if we know this, why hasn't the NCAA been able – now, I know they keep getting sued, but why haven't they been able to put things in place to make this work? It seems like the schools, Curry, are calling for something, but then when they go to try to enforce it, they get sued and they can't enforce anything. What's the reasoning behind that?
I think it was, honestly, it goes back to their unwillingness to change.
Right.
They dug their heels in for so long that when they finally let the cat out of the bag, there was no chance in getting it back. I mean, you think about, Brien, I don't know if you played, I think you were a little before Jeremy Bloom, but Jeremy Bloom, to me,
I remember him though, for Colorado.
Yeah, I like to use him as an example all the time. Jeremy Bloom was a really talented football player, was an even more talented skier.
Yep.
And with his skiing abilities and the fact that he was an Olympian, he created an apparel brand, or apparel line with a prominent outdoor ski brand. The NCAA came in and said, hey, despite the fact that has nothing to do with who you are as a college athlete, you can't make any money off of it. And then there's a more recent example of a kicker down at UCF who created a really prominent YouTube channel just showing tips and tricks and things like that. And the NCAA said, hey, you can't make money off of that. And the kid, because his YouTube channel was so successful, said, I'm done playing collegiate football. I'm going to continue with YouTube. And I think those are just a couple examples, but I think that firm resistance to allowing to creating any change as we progressed as a society is what ultimately led to this point. Because then you get to the back half of the 2010s, and you've had the O'Bannon lawsuit, you've had the EA Sports lawsuit, you've had the Alston lawsuit was going through the courts at that time, and in 2019, individual states across America start passing state laws saying, we're going to allow student athletes to start making NIL money starting July 1, 2021, setting that date as the effective date. Well, the NCAA, instead of using that year and a half or 2 years to prepare for that, to create a system that worked, to create guardrails and everything else, sat on their hands because they wanted to see the outcome of this Alston lawsuit. Then they got 8 days before July 1, 2021, got raked over the coals by the Supreme Court, decided to come out with an interim NIL policy that contained a couple of rules: no recruiting inducements and no pay for play, or essentially the only two, significant one. Recruiting inducements, that one's already off the table. And so essentially the only rule that exists is no pay for play. And so I think, unfortunately, what's happened is the NCAA, because of its unwillingness to act, has put us in this precarious situation of nobody likes the model, but I don't know that there's a way to change it, or to change it effectively and absolutely. So I think we're in a really tough spot right now, and the NCAA is to blame.
Yeah. Curry, I saw this as the NCAA didn't get their way, so they pouted. And, they just said, well, we're going to take our ball and go home. And the members were left hanging. But as an outsider, it strikes me that what the courts keep telling the NCAA and the NCAA refuses to hear is student athletes need representation in these discussions. They have a lot at stake here, and they have very little to none in terms of representation. At the end of the day, the member institutions can set the rules and ignore the players' wishes. And I think the courts are saying, no, the players need to have a voice here. And if you don't do that, no matter what you pass, you're not going to hold up in court.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And I think, like you said, Brien and Fitz, like you just said, I think the NCAA is with O'Bannon and Alston and other cases that happened in between has essentially lost their ability to, and the amateurism argument was gone with Alston and their ability to try to cut down on student athlete rights is just, they've lost it. And so really the leverage completely shifted in the last decade from the NCAA and its member institutions to the athletes. And that now we're truly in a situation where the athletes have all the power, all the leverage.
Yes.
Which I don't, as a former student athlete, I don't necessarily dislike, but I do think we could have allowed the student athletes to exercise more of their rights while keeping the model intact, keeping things relatively contained, and that's just something that we're not doing, and I don't know that we'll be able to do it at any point in the near future.
No, you're 100% right, Curry. To me, it was stubbornness and greed, and exactly what happened is just what you said, is that the student athletes have all the power, but first of all, it didn't have to be that way, and second of all, there has to be a balance. Although, as a former player, and I've said this on many occasions, even today, I am always going to be pro player, but there has to be a balance. It can't just be all one side and all the other side. That never works for very long. And now we're starting to see it, and it's not going to work for very long. And then what are we going to do? It's just, I want to say that cooler heads will prevail, but fellas, when we're dealing with this amount of money and power, how often do cooler heads prevail? I mean, when does that ever happen? Just seriously, I mean, Fitz, when you've been here, and I'm not trying to age or anything like that, but when have cooler heads ever prevailed when you're talking about money and power? When does that happen?
Well, yeah, look around the landscape of college athletics now. It's just a money grab from the institutions, joining conferences that make no sense. I mean, you've got two schools in California and one in Texas in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I mean, it's just insane what's happened, but it comes down to money. There's a lot of it, and everyone wants their portion.
Yeah. That's where it is. It's out of control. Yep. Curry said it several times, and he's 100% right. Not sure you can put that genie back in the bottle. No. We're going to have to find a different bottle. That's kind of what I had that discussion with somebody last week, and that's what he said. And you know what? It's true. We're going to have to find a different bottle because that genie got big, will not fit back in there. So we're going to have to figure this out. Curry, man, I want to thank you for taking the time today to come and talk to us and explain not only to us, but other people out there that kind of had some questions on what this lawsuit was about. Because as you mentioned, it's kind of been on the back burner. People knew about it, but they kind of threw a little nugget out there last week for people to kind of chew on it. And then all of a sudden the questions started coming that, hey, this is a much more of a big deal than what people are talking about. It's a really big deal. And even now, because it actually hasn't settled, people still aren't talking about it as much, because I got a feeling when the settlement actually happens, and there will be a settlement for the reasons that you stated, it is going to blow up. And the one thing that I can hope is that it doesn't happen during college football season. I'll be honest. That is the one thing that I do not want to be talking about during college football season is all of this stuff. It will absolutely, my head will explode. It will literally explode. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day really to number one, to discuss it, explain it. And we want to thank you for that.
Yeah, happy to come on and chat anytime. Always happy to chat about NIL and the college athletics landscape. And yeah, I'm with you. I hope it doesn't happen during football season. My hope is that it'll happen before the end of the NCAA in most schools' fiscal year, June 30, and that way we can start preparing. Hopefully by this time next year, the landscape looks a little bit different and is maybe a little bit more sturdy. So
absolutely. Thank you. We're going to take one quick break here before we end the show. But again, we want to thank Curry for his time today. Again, one word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial Partners, and we'll be back.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's head back to the studio.
Well, Fitz, man, that's a lot of good information by Curry there. Just kind of breaking it down. And it's exactly what we've talked about on several times. But I believe he gave a little bit more clarity to a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes that, look, people just don't want to read it. They just want, somebody explain it to. And I thought Curry did an outstanding job of just breaking down exactly the landscape of what's going on, not only in college athletics, but it's specifically with this crazy lawsuit.
Yeah. We get caught up a lot in transactional things, coach hirings, firings, transfer portals become essentially free agency in the college level. The transactions that, we cover games and transactions. Nobody becomes a sports reporter to be a court reporter. So I want to give a shout out to those in the media, the national media, who are handling this issue for all of us. It's got to be annoying. You want to cover games too and talk to coaches about ball. And here we are covering court cases, quite a few lately with the NCAA. But this case isn't another element to what's going on in the greater picture of college athletics. It is it's a summation of everything. This is what will change everything, not necessarily transfer portal or NIL. This case is going to force incredible changes across the entire landscape, at least of the power level of the NCAA.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank everybody again for coming and checking us out. Again, remember to like, follow, subscribe on YouTube. It's at Big 12 Insiders on YouTube 24/7. We appreciate everybody. Remember to leave the comments and hit the notification bell. It's a race to 1,000 subscribers by football season, people. I think we're going to make it. We still need you to subscribe, but I think we're going to make it. If we get there, that is the goal. So we need your help. We appreciate everybody. Tomorrow we got BYU coming on, discussing what their football plans and all that stuff, what's going on with them. So we'll see everybody tomorrow. And again, this is Big 12 Insiders.
This has been a Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.